her with a frown and released his arm from her grip. "Don't touch me with your filthy hands. I don't ever want to see you in my life." "Let me explain myself," she mumbled with teary eyes. The girl beside Sabian rolled her eyes and dragged him away. Wine followed him. "Sabian," she called him out, but he ignored her while Wine heard a few students laughing and saying, "Wine has no shame. I thought she wouldn't show up after cheating on Sabian. She is from an elite class family. These people don't know the definition of shame." Wine clenched her fist and walked past them when she bumped into someone and her bag fell, causing the books to scatter. "Bloody shameless bitch." The boy glanced at her and said. Wine bent over to pick up her books when someone grabbed her hand. "Hey moron, come back," he said loudly in a serious tone, grabbing everyone's attention. He released Wine's hand. "Them, what are you doing?" Them's heart missed a beat hearing his name from her. "Something that you should have done." He stepped forward. "What, are you trying to pick a fight?" Them stared dead into his eyes. "Pick up her books and bag." You bumped into her intentionally. The boy chuckled and moved closer to him. "Why are you taking a stand for this bitch?" Before he could complete, Them punched him in the jaw. "Say one more time." He kicked him. The boy landed on the floor. Them began punching him constantly. "Them, stop." She moved towards him with wide eyes while all the students were watching the scene as if they were in a cinema. "Leave him, Them." She held his arm and cried. Then stopped and looked at her. He stood running his fingers through his hair while the boy groaned in pain. "What the hell are you all doing here? The film is over. Get back to your business." He growled, making him startle, and turned towards Wine. The boy barely stood and was about to walk away when Them stopped him, apologized to her, and picked up her stuff. He muttered through a clenched. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, picking up the books and bag. Wine held them while the boy walked away. Them moved closer to Wine and handed her the tissue. "The world oppresses weak and pathetic people," he said coldly. The priest's voice snapped her back to the present. Wine fixed her gaze on Them, who was staring at her with affection. "I do," she mumbled. The hall erupted with applause and cheers. Them's eyes smiled, but he masked his expressions. "𝐒𝐞𝐜 the bride." Them gently lifted up the veil and cupped the side of her face. He leaned and placed a soft and quick kiss on her lips. Wine lowered her gaze. Everyone gathered around them to congratulate them. Hugs were exchanged and warm wishes filled the air. Wine's stepmom and stepsis came, followed by her dad. Her sister Sandy was eyeing Them head to toe. "Finally someone accepted you," she said with her usual annoying smirk. Them was talking to Mr. Song. "What do you mean? After knowing what type of a girl you are, this guy still accepted you. Do you know why? Because of your dad's money." Wine clenched her jaw and glanced at Them. "Dear stepmom, don't hide your daughter's doings by blaming me. You and I both know who did what. Believe me, in a few days Dad will throw you out of the house." She turned towards Sandy and smirked. "Look at Sandy, how lustfully she is gawking at her brother-in-law." Mrs. Song slapped Sandy's arm, who was about to throw herself on Them. "What?" she said annoyingly while Mr. Song turned towards Wine. "Congratulations, Wine," he said with a faint smile and embraced her in a warm hug. Mrs. Song passed them a dead stare. "Them, I hope you won't hurt my daughter in any way." Them nodded and held Wine's hand. "We must leave now. It's pretty late." Mr. Song nodded while Mrs. Kim and Them's sister Alma walked Wine to the car. They drove home in complete silence. Mrs. Kim and Alma sent Wine to their room while Them went to bid them farewell. Wine stood in front of the dressing mirror, staring at her reflection. She was muddled up in her thoughts when Them entered and stood behind her. She fixed her gaze on his reflection. "I didn't expect you to be my groom," she said in a low tone. Them chuckled, snagging his arms around her waist and pulling her closer. "I know you didn't agree on a date, or else you would have seen me." She lowered her gaze. "I was scared. What if you questioned me about my past?" He turned her around and lifted her chin. "I know everything, but why are you so scared? Are you guilty of something?" She shook her head in denial. "I didn't do anything. I was framed by my stepmom and stepsister. Sabian thought I cheated him." "Do you still love him?" She shook her head in denial. "Not at all. I lost my feelings for him the moment he called me names. Self-respect matters to me the most." He smiled faintly. "Do you want to spend the rest of your because of your dad. He cupped the side of her cheeks. I didn't marry you because of that. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. She held his hands which were resting on her cheeks. Can you adjust in this small room and small house? He asked, looking around the room. Wayne chuckled. Of course I can, as long as you make me feel at home. He let out a sigh of relief and kissed her on the forehead. I'm too late to be your first love, but I'll do anything to be your last, I promise. He said hoarsely and slid out the box from his pocket. He opened it, revealing a beautiful diamond necklace. He was about to put it on her, but Wayne held his hands with wide eyes. Thanks, this is so expensive, I don't want it. He removed her hands and put it on her neck. You can't say no to a gift. He moved back, staring at her neck. Perfect. Wayne turned towards the dressing mirror and touched it. Do you like it? She nodded with a smile. Wayne kissed her neck, taking her off guard. Wayne's cheeks flushed red. Now go and change, you must be tired. She stared at him with surprise. What, were you expecting something else? He whispered huskily. Wayne's heartbeat raced. She looked away, flustered. Move away. She muttered, confused by his intense gaze, and made her way to the washroom. Then shook his head with a smile and let out a sigh. Few days later, Wayne couldn't resist Thane's soft personality. The way he treats her and prioritizes her comfort and consent makes her heart flutter. Mrs. Kim and Alma usually visit Wayne as Thane goes to work early in the morning and comes home late at night. They don't want to make her feel lonely. Wayne talked to her dad and learned that he divorced his wife and threw her and Sandy out of the house. Now Wayne was asleep at the dining table when exhausted Thane entered the house. A smile curled up on his lips. She was literally his stress relief. He went closer to her and leaned towards her. He stared at her without even blinking. How many years he had waited and worked hard to see her and hold her. He gently tangled his fingers in her hair and tenderly stroked them. One leaned into his touch. Thane pressed a long kiss on her temple. She fluttered her eyes. You're back, she said in a low tone and rosy voice. Why are you sleeping here? He ran his thumb from her cheek to Joe. I was waiting for you, she said straight. How many times do I have to tell you not to wait for me? He grabbed her jaw. You work so hard for us, can't I just wait for you? He shook his head with a sigh. All right, leave it. Go and change, I'll heat the food. I prepared your favorite dishes. I'll change later and you don't have to cook or do this house chores and all. When Mom and Alma come, tell them to do it or else I'll tell them to do it for you. He said sternly. Come on, Thane, do you know what you're saying? Why would they do the work when I'm here? I know you're not used to this lifestyle. I'm working hard. She placed her index finger on his lips. Do you think my stepmom had let me live a luxurious life? He held her hand and kissed her knuckles. Anyways, let's eat. He nodded and made his way to wash his hands while Wayne walked to the kitchen to heat the food. Soon they were done eating. Thane went to freshen up and Wayne did the dishes. After the dishes were done, Wayne did her night routine and laid on the bed. She wanted to get a job and support Thane financially, but she didn't know how to talk to him about it. She was lost in her thoughts when Thane laid beside her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her closer. What are you thinking? He asked, resting his chin on her shoulder while Wayne's back was pressed against his chest. You don't have to do overtime, Thane. We'll be fine with your income and your boss gives you double work. Such a jerk, bloody moron. She looked at him from the corner of her eyes. Thane almost choked the air. Jerk, moron, me? She shook her head in denial and turned to face him. No, your boss. He scratched his neck. I'm my boss. He muttered inaudibly. How do you know he makes me work double? I have seen you waking till midnight and working on some files. He nodded and made a mental note to be cautious next time. Thane, she pressed her head on his chest. He hummed in response, playing with her hair. I want to get a job. His body went stiff. Why? I want to help you. You wouldn't be burdened alone. She placed her chin on his chest and stared at him. No need. I don't want you to help me. I earn enough. He spoke sternly. I know, but at least you wouldn't have to work so hard, please. She propped up and pleaded. He shook his head in denial. No means no. Stay at home. But I have an interview tomorrow. He stared at her with surprise. What? Why What type of stuff will be there? How will they treat you? He spoke worriedly. She covered his face and kissed his chin. It's a new company, 𝐊𝐶 Enterprises. I have heard their boss is amazing, so are the employees. Thames' heart sank. What, 𝐊𝐶? Yeah, she nodded excitedly. Thames stared at her blankly. Okay, fine, let's sleep now, it's getting late. Good night. He pecked her cheeks. Wine was too excited to notice his stressed expressions. Time skipped. Wine was happy after getting the job. As she had heard, the staff was really amazing. She made friends with a few people. Since she had joined, there isn't much work for her. The company is doing quite well. Every female employee is crushing over the boss, but Wine didn't get to see him yet. She was curious if he really looked the way everyone said. This morning, Wine saw 𝐊𝐵N. She heard a few people saying their company is working on a project with 𝐊𝐵N's company. Now Wine was sitting in the staff room as she didn't have any work to do when the door opened and closed, causing her to turn around. What are you doing here? She asked with a frown, seeing 𝐊𝐵N coming towards her. It's been so long, he said and attempted to hold her hands, but she moved back. Wine, I'm here to apologize. I know that was all Sandy and her mom's plan. Sandy called you to help her, but she locked you up with that guy and took your pictures. I know nothing have happened. Those were... Wine cut in. What's the point of saying this all to me? I know everything and this is what I tried to tell you back then. She spoke furiously. 𝐊𝐵N held her by the shoulders. I know I made a grave mistake. I want to make it right and get back to you. I love you so much, please. Leave me, 𝐊𝐵N. I'm married and I'm very happy with my husband. She slapped away his hands. I know he's a poor guy. He can't even give you a good life. You don't even love him and here you are working. One slapped him in the face, cutting him off. Don't you speak a word against my husband. Who are you to talk about my personal life? Get lost from my sight. She held his collar and pushed him. Just then Wine's phone rang while the door opened, revealing her boss secretary. Mr. Morrison, sir is calling you to his office. He walked out with 𝐊𝐵N without sparing a glance at Wine. She let out a sigh and smiled, seeing Thames' caller ID. Thank, she mumbled and said, what's wrong with your voice? Are you stressed? Did something happen in the office? He asked worriedly. No, it's nothing. I just have a severe headache, she said, rubbing her temples. I'll come to pick you up in 15 minutes. We'll go to the doctor. No, you don't have to come. I'll go home at my usual time. She heard him scoff. I'm coming. No one is going to say anything to you, he said and declined the call. Wine stared at her phone and shook her head. In a few minutes, the secretary came and said she could leave if her work was done. In 15 minutes, Tham arrived and picked her up. She insisted on not going to the hospital, so Tham sent her home. Now Wine freshened up and came out of the washroom when she saw Tham ready to go somewhere. Where are you going? She walked to him. Tham smiled and held her hand. I ordered the food, but they don't deliver to this area, so I'm going. No need to bring anything, I'll cook. You're exhausted, go and rest. She shook her head in denial. Since I have joined the office, you order from outside and don't let me cook. I don't want to eat from outside. She dragged him to the bed and sat him. Fine, then I'll cook today. He pulled her towards him. One pressed her body onto him and leaned on him. What's bothering you? No, nothing. It's just that I met 𝐊𝐵N today. She intertwined her fingers with his. He wanted me to get back together with him because he discovered who was behind the switches and all. What do you want? Do you want to get back to him? She sat straight and stared at him with an unpleasant expression. Why would you ask me this question? Do you think I want to get back with him after he leaked those photos in the college and said so many mean and disgusting words to me? She spoke furiously. He cupped her face. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it in that way. I just want your happiness. She slapped away his hands and stood so did Tham. That was mean. Don't you know where is my happiness? She mumbled with teary eyes. He reached out to her, closing the distance between them. I'm sorry, he mumbled and placed her hand against his chest. I don't want to be selfish. My love isn't selfish. Your happiness and consent comes first, he said in a low tone and kissed her on the forehead with devotion. I love you, she said, taking him off guard. He stared at her with wide eyes. What? He barely mumbled when Wine pressed her lips against his. I love you, she mumbled over his lips, and wrapped his right arm around her waist and left around her neck, pressing his lips further. questioning gaze, tucking the hair strands behind her ear. I slapped Sabian. He was talking shit about you. He raised his brows. He knows who is your husband. No, he doesn't know it's you. Theo nodded. I'm starving. Let me cook for you. You go and rest. He kissed her on the forehead. No, I'll come with you. Yeah, you want to distract me, he said with a smile. 𝐿𝐴𝐴 chuckled and followed him out. Time skip. Today it was 𝐿𝐴𝐴's birthday, but no one including Theo wished her. A few days ago she mentioned to Theo about her birthday. Now she came to the office muddled up with her thoughts when she frowned, seeing the decorations in the office. From her colleague she came to know that it was done by their boss, as it was his wife's birthday today. I looked around with a smile. Everyone was running here and there as the boss was about to come. A colleague came and told 𝐿𝐴𝐴 to get on the line, while 𝐿𝐴𝐴 was curious to see her boss. She stood in the line while other employees blocked her view, causing her to sigh. The hall erupted with applause and greetings as the boss entered. Theo had a wide smile on his face, holding the flower bouquet. His heart was restless to see 𝐿𝐴𝐴, as this morning he left earlier than usual to prepare the surprise for her. Everyone moved out of his way as he walked towards 𝐿𝐴𝐴, followed by his secretary. 𝐿𝐴𝐴 nervously clutched the hem of her shirt, seeing everyone moving away while whispering, "Boss is coming towards us." She was about to step away but froze, seeing Theo in expensive Gucci attire, branded shoes and an expensive Rolex watch on his wrist. She stared at him in a daze. "Happy birthday, my love," he said as he came closer and handed her the flower bouquet. 𝐿𝐴𝐴 stared at him with wide eyes. He kissed her forehead when the whispers around them snapped her back to reality. 𝐿𝐴𝐴 is the boss's wife. She never told us anything. They might want to keep their relationship private. Whatsoever, she's so lucky to have a husband like Mr. Kim. He loves her so much. I heard he built this company for the sake of her. 𝐿𝐴𝐴 felt so many emotions all at once. She stared at Theo, who was staring at her as if the world around him didn't exist. She looked away, clutching the bouquet in her hand, as her mind was still in a daze. Her eyes looked up while a smile appeared on her face, seeing her dad. "Dad," she rushed to him, leaving Theo behind, who knew she was upset with him, or else she would never look away from him. She met her dad and cut the cake. All this time she didn't spare a glance at Theo, who was on the verge of losing patience. Somehow Theo managed to call her to his office. 𝐿𝐴𝐴 entered without knocking on the door but found the office empty. She walked towards his table and looked around the office when she felt Theo's muscular arms wrapped around her waist from behind. She stood still, feeling his hot breath on the side of her cheek and neck. "CEO Kim," she muttered. "Are you taunting me? Who am I to taunt you, Mr. Kim?" He turned her around and trapped her between his arms. Her back was pressed against the table. "Stop it, 𝐿𝐴𝐴. I know you're angry, but I can explain. Don't act indifferently, it hurts me." He spoke softly. She let out a sigh and nodded. "Explain." She tugged the hem of his coat and tilted his head towards her. "I have been in love with you since the first day I saw you. It was love at first sight, but then I came to know about you in Sapien. It hurt me, but I had gone too far to come back. I was losing hope until you both broke up. Life had given me a chance and I couldn't let it go, but for that, I needed to earn more. I knew I had to spoil you, so I waited for a few years and then met your dad. He was looking for some proposals for you, but I told him I wanted to marry you. He wanted to get you married as soon as possible because of your stepmom and her daughter's stupid stunts. I wanted to grow my company first and then marry you, but your dad insisted, so I decided to surprise you with all this on your birthday." 𝐿𝐴𝐴 chuckled. "I'm such a fool. That's why you would bring expensive clothes for me after every 2 days. And I barely got to work here with a fat income." She shook her head. He rested his hand on her cheek. "Thank you for everything, but your love was enough for me," she said with a smile, holding his hand. "I love to spoil you with both my money and love." He pulled her into a passionate kiss, while wrapped her arms around his neck while he lifted her and sat her on the desk, standing between her legs. He explored each corner of her mouth until an annoying male voice interrupted them. "𝐿𝐴𝐴," they broke the kiss, panting heavily. "Welcome, Mr. Morrison. Meet my wife, Kim 𝐿𝐴𝐴," he said without taking his eyes off 𝐿𝐴𝐴 and wiping her lips with his thumb. Sabian felt suffocated. "By the way, you must know nudging him. Diane looked at him while Vine rested her head on his chest, facing Sabian, whose face was pale as if blood had drained from his face. I knocked, but you didn't respond. He spoke, still in a shock. Then you should have left instead of interrupting us, she said with an unpleasant expression. Please excuse us, Mr. Morrison. Sabian left without looking back. Let's go to our new home. Vine nodded